So what does it actually mean to be a good person? I mean, seriously, it's a question that has literally kept philosophers awake at night for thousands of years. And honestly, it's one we probably ask ourselves all the time. We all want to be good, right? We want to do the right thing. But the hard truth is, it's incredibly easy to be good when it costs us absolutely nothing. The true test, the real test of our moral fabric, happens when our deepest values conflict, and that seemingly simple idea of goodness gets surprisingly murky. Well, today we are going to clear that up. We're going to map out exactly what moral goodness is, how it evolves, and most importantly, how you can actively cultivate it in your own everyday life.
Welcome to this explainer. I am genuinely so incredibly excited to guide you through this material today. We are going to be exploring a fantastic, really comprehensive guide created by Team Gnarfard, titled Developing and Mastering Moral Goodness. And listen, this isn't just a bunch of high-level, head-in-the-clouds theory. This explainer is designed to be an actionable roadmap. Whether you're focused on your own personal growth, maybe you're navigating some tricky professional ethics at work, or you're just trying to create positive social change in your community, the insights we are about to unpack are going to give you a remarkably robust framework for making ethical decisions.
Okay, let's dive into this agenda really quick. We are going to follow a very logical theory-to-practice funnel. First, we'll define moral goodness, then explore the major philosophies of ethics. From there, we'll look at the psychological stages of moral development. Once we have that solid theoretical groundwork under us, we'll pivot right into the practical, building your moral character, applying these ethics in professional life, and finally, embarking on the path to mastery. It's a highly structured journey, and as you'll see, every single step builds directly on the last.
So, Section 1, Defining Moral Goodness, the core foundations. Before we can master ethical behavior, we absolutely must clearly define its building blocks.
And the concept we're looking at here brilliantly illustrates this whole thing from the bottom up. At the very root, the foundation, we have desire. This is our internal motivation toward making ethical choices. It's the fundamental seed of all goodness. Moving up from desire, we have action. That's our ethical behavior and right conduct playing out in the real world. Above that is character, which represents those cultivated, virtuous traits and our long-term dispositions. And finally, sitting right at the peak, we have well-being. This is the ultimate goal, both for ourselves and for others. What this tells us is that moral goodness is essentially a giant puzzle encompassing everything from our deepest, most private desires all the way up to concrete actions that promote collective flourishing. It's not just about what you do, it's about why you do it and the character you build along the way.
Moving on to Section 2, Philosophies of Ethics, 4 distinct lenses. Because throughout history, brilliant minds have defined goodness in fundamentally different ways.
Okay, our first lens is consequentialism, which was championed by thinkers like John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Imagine if you were a city planner trying to decide exactly where to build a new hospital, but you only have the budget for one. Consequentialism evaluates actions based strictly on their outcomes and results. The morally good action is the one that produces the most beneficial consequences for the greatest number of people. It's heavily focused on the actual math of morality. If an action results in more overall happiness or less overall suffering, a consequentialist would argue it's for sure the morally correct choice. But let's complicate that. What if building that hospital requires using eminent domain to tear down a historic, much-loved neighborhood? Well, a strict consequentialist would say that if the hospital saves more lives than the sadness caused by the destruction of those homes, it's still the right choice. The end, in this view, strictly justifies the means.
But now let's contrast this completely with our second lens, deontology. Imagine if someone asked you to tell a small lie to save a friend's feelings or maybe their reputation. A strict deontologist, like Immanuel Kant, would say absolutely not, no way. Deontology focuses entirely on the inherent rightness of the actions themselves. Goodness is defined by following moral duties and respecting rational principles regardless of the consequences. For Kant, there's something called the categorical imperative. Basically, this is the idea that a rule is only morally good if you would be perfectly comfortable with everyone in the world following it all the time. Since a world where everyone lies all the time would literally fall apart, lying is inherently wrong. There are absolute rules that must be followed to the letter. It doesn't matter if breaking a rule might lead to a slightly better outcome in a specific, highly unusual scenario. In this lens, rational duty and strict adherence to universal rules reign supreme over any final outcome.
Let's move to a different perspective and see how this builds. What if we focus not on the rules or the outcomes, but on the person making the decision? That brings us to virtue ethics. Instead of focusing on the math of outcomes or strict adherence to rules, thinkers like Aristotle and Confucius center their philosophy on the individual. Virtue ethics is all about developing excellent character traits.
It suggests that moral goodness comes from cultivating virtues, things like bravery, temperance, and justice over a lifetime. The idea here is that if you focus on building a character grounded in practical wisdom, you'll just naturally make good choices when faced with dilemmas. And practical wisdom is a fascinating concept. It's the lived experience of knowing exactly how to apply a virtue. For instance, knowing when a situation calls for brutally honest truth and knowing when it calls for gentle, quiet support. It's way less about judging a single, isolated action and much more about the lifelong, nuanced pursuit of ultimate human flourishing.
Finally, we step back to look at value theory, associated with figures like G.E. Moore and David Ross. This lens takes a huge step back and asks the fundamental question, what actually makes something good in the first place? Why do we inherently value certain qualities in life, like truth, beauty, or pleasure? Value theory explores the crucial difference between intrinsic goodness, things that are good in and of themselves, and instrumental goodness, things that are good because they help us achieve something else. Think about it for a second. We value money instrumentally, right? Because we use it to buy things that give us security or comfort. But we value happiness intrinsically. We just want it for its own sake. Take a moment to just think about that in your own life. What do you value just for the sake of it? Understanding what we truly value intrinsically is absolutely essential for constructing any kind of robust, meaningful ethical framework.
All right, Section 3, Stages of Moral Development, Growing Up Ethically. How do we actually develop these complex ethical frameworks as we age?
Let's spend a good minute or two meticulously guiding ourselves up these developmental steps. How do we actually build our moral compass over time? At the base, we have the pre-conventional level. This is the earliest stage, where morality is entirely externally controlled. Think of a young child. They follow rules primarily for Stage 1, obedience to authority and avoiding punishment. Their internal monologue is simply, if I do this, will I get in trouble? As they grow slightly, they reach Stage 2, self-interest and simple exchanges. If you help me, I'll help you. The reasoning here is very concrete, highly transactional, and entirely self-focused. Then, we step up to the conventional level. This is critical because honestly, this is where most adults operate on a day-to-day basis. We internalize the moral standards of valued adult role models and society at large. Stage 3 is all about interpersonal relationships and social approval, wanting to be seen as a good person in the eyes of your peers and family. Stage 4 expands this to society at large, maintaining social order and following established rules. We obey the law because the law is what holds society together, preventing total chaos. But finally, we reach the highest level, the post-conventional level. And it is absolutely crucial to emphasize how rare and difficult this leap from the conventional to the post-conventional level truly is. Moving past just following the law to recognizing universal justice takes deep, deep reflection. Stage 5 involves recognizing the social contract and individual rights. It's understanding that while rules are important, they are social agreements that should serve the greatest good, and if they don't, they can and should be changed. And Stage 6 is the absolute pinnacle, operating purely on universal ethical principles.
Which brings us to Section 4, Building Your Moral Character, from theory to action. We're pivoting now from the theoretical, why and what, into the highly practical how.
Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown of core character strengths is how they all interact with each other. We have fairness, a commitment to justice, equality, and treating people without bias. This is the bedrock that builds trust. We have kindness, genuine care for others' well-being without any expectation of a reward. This is what actively reduces suffering in the world. We have wisdom, the ability to see multiple perspectives and make highly nuanced judgments in incredibly complex situations. But look at that last one, courage. Courage is the strength to do what is right despite personal risk or deep discomfort. The absolute crucial point here is that courage is the essential engine required to enact the other three. Think about it. You can be wise enough to know exactly what is fair and kind enough to deeply care about it, but without the courage to actually stand up against injustice or maintain your integrity when you're under immense pressure, your fairness, your kindness, and your wisdom remain purely theoretical. You absolutely need courage to ignite moral action.
So how do we actually build these strengths? Through practical activities. And I want to speak directly to you right now. Try implementing just one of these today. You could start a daily reflection practice. Set aside just 10 minutes to write to a prompt like, when did I show courage today? Or practice gratitude and moral awareness by keeping a journal of the moral goodness you witness in others. You can engage in service and volunteerism, the direct boots-on-the-ground experience of helping others radically develop sympathy. Or try ethical dilemma analysis. Take a hypothetical scenario or a current news story, apply moral principles to it, and discuss it with trusted friends. Discussing these dilemmas out loud is literally one of the most remarkably effective ways to uncover your own ethical blind spots and dramatically expand your moral reasoning.
Beyond specific activities, building character is deeply rooted in modeling, learning, and habits. This is especially true if you're a parent or a leader in any capacity. And actions absolutely speak louder than words. Children, and frankly your peers, absorb the values you demonstrate rather than just what you say. Consistently model behavior like admitting your mistakes openly or showing unprompted kindness to service workers. You also need to create learning opportunities, discussing ethical themes in books, documentaries, or movies. And ultimately, the whole shebang comes down to habit formation. Moral excellence comes through repetition. If you build reflection time into your daily schedule, ethical behavior eventually stops being a difficult, agonizing choice and just becomes an effortless, instinctual second nature.
Section 5. Ethics in Professional Life. Taking it to work. Think about your own workplace for a second. How do these virtues hold up under intense professional pressures?
To advance moral goodness professionally, there are 4 key strategies you can implement. First, ethics workshops. Engaging in structured learning keeps ethical considerations at the absolute forefront of your professional identity. Second, reflective practice. This means maintaining a professional journal, specifically documenting your ethical challenges at work. Analyzing your decisions after the fact helps you identify long-term patterns and subtle biases you might have missed. Third is peer consultation. You must establish relationships with trusted colleagues to create safe, highly confidential spaces for discussing difficult cases without any judgment. A colleague's outside perspective will almost always illuminate a blind spot you couldn't see. And fourth is ethical leadership. As your career advances, you must intentionally incorporate these considerations into your leadership approach. You literally have the immense power to create an organizational culture that actually rewards integrity. For example, loudly praising and financially rewarding a team member who chose to pass on a highly lucrative but ethically questionable deal. Remember, your moral influence expands dramatically as your professional responsibility grows.
And that brings us to Section 6, the path to mastery, an ongoing journey. Because moral goodness isn't a final destination we just arrive at.
So the crucial point is that the path to mastery is a continuous cycle. It begins with intentional practice, setting specific, measurable goals for your moral growth. This leads directly to self-awareness, developing the deep emotional intelligence required to recognize your own blind spots and defensive triggers. That awareness empowers ethical action, moving beyond comfortable theory to actually apply these principles in challenging, real-world situations where the stakes are high. And every action must be followed by deep reflection, examining your choices and ensuring they align with your core values, which then naturally informs your next phase of intentional practice. True mastery requires a very delicate balance. You need the deep humility to recognize that there is always more to learn, combined with the confident intuition to deeply trust your developing moral compass when the pressure is really on.
I really want you to take this to heart. The goal is progress, not perfection. You will make mistakes. We all do. Ethics is a messy, human endeavor. But genuine moral goodness uplifts both you as an individual and the entire society around you. As you continue to consciously develop these qualities using the frameworks we've discussed today, your genuine commitment to ethical growth creates positive ripple effects far beyond your immediate circle. You contribute directly and meaningfully to a more just and compassionate world. Which brings us to the most important question of this entire explainer. How will you practice moral goodness today? Seriously, what's your first step? Will you start a reflection journal? Will you model courage at work? The roadmap is right there in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating topic. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and go put this into practice.